Hey guys, today I'll show you how I did this Jurassic Park mosquito in amber cane. So I'll show you really how to do it and how not to do it. This stuff here, that's the thing I had tried at first. It didn't work as well as I wanted it to, but I guess it could still do the trick. It just didn't work for me. I used those little Ziploc container things. And then of course you'll need your amber dye to put the resin, the amber color. And of course your mosquito, or really that's called a crane fly, so a big mosquito. So first thing you want to do is let your resin set for about 20 minutes until it gets a little bit jelly. Then you can stick in your mosquito, and after you pour the second half, and you can see here it really got a lot hotter than I thought it would, and my mosquito started bubbling. So since it wasn't dry enough, it made air bubbles, and those really you can't do much once those are formed. And the container that I had used, it started leaking, so it was just hot glue that I used to put one piece into the other, and I didn't think that the heat of the amber would make it, the heat of the resin would make it melt, but it did. So that was a fail, so I tried with a different tactic. So I used a little cup instead. I poured the first half, I taped the whole thing shut, poured the other half, and for some reason it stayed kind of hazy and bubbly. I still don't know why it didn't work as well as the first time. I used pretty much the same temperature, and you can see you can't really see the mosquito too well. And since of the angle that I put it in, you can easily see where you poured the first half and the second half. So it should have been put the other way around, horizontally instead of vertically. The next thing I did was to make my own little silicone mold. So I used some poster board, cut the inside of the frame to be about 2 inches by 2 inches by 4 inches, and your silicone mixing stuff. If you're gonna do the same, I definitely would try a different kind of silicone. That one was just air dry, but there's some that you can buy. It's two different halves. You mix them together and then they harden quite fast. This one here took like weeks until it was all finally done, so I tried the other kind. And that's kind of how it ended up looking at the end. So it does the trick, but of course it's not super sturdy. But you know, the water doesn't drip. So the second type of resin I've tried was this stuff here, which worked quite a bit better. There were less air bubbles, and that one just works. You instead of two different halves, you just put the resin and then a few drops of the catalyst, the activator, and of course your amber dye. And when you stir it, you want to go not too fast, not too crazy, just to try to minimize the air bubbles that you put into them. Especially once you put the catalyst in, because then it'll start to harden not too long after. And when you pour it, that's when I try to really take my time so that the few air bubbles that there are do have time to kind of get to the surface before it gets filled up with more stuff. So here that's about after 15 minutes testing if it was jelly enough, but it's still too liquidy. And as I was waiting, a little one of those crane flies just decided to come visit. So there are a lot of them around here at this time of year. And after about 25 minutes, then it was getting to the jelly stage. So this one is actually the fifth time that I was doing it. So, and the time before worked well, so I'm trying to line up the mosquito the same way as I did the first time. And once it's in, it's really hard to get it to move. So you want to try to place it as perfectly as you can the first time. So for those of you with a soft heart like me, all the mosquitoes I've used were either already dead or just about to die, stuck in a spider web where the spider was nowhere to be found. So I didn't feel too bad about using those ones. And you can see here I'm trying to take my time again so there's no air bubbles, and this speed here did really work quite well because there were really no air bubbles on the ones that did work well. And there was one leg here that was really in the way, so I was trying to put that one in place, squeeze the sides together because it was expanded a bit. That little leg I was trying to move, well, of course it fell off, so there'll be one less leg in this one. And these were my 5 attempts. So the first one, that just made a lot of air bubbles. I had tried to kind of poke a needle through all of them to see if it would help, but it didn't really work. This one here, that was just too hazy, so not see-through enough, and the angle was wrong. This one here, my mosquito was a bit sideways and it bubbled as well. Really, you should let the mosquito dry for at least a week for the bubbles not to happen. This was my first success, and then since I just had a spare mosquito, I decided to make another one, and that one worked as well. Next thing was just to sand the sides flush before I could attach it to the lathe. And on my machine here, I had to drill in four extra holes because the standard ones were just too far apart. So I drilled those, added some screws, and attached the whole thing. And I just bought this lathe here for this project, and that's the first time I'm using it. So don't judge my wood turning skills too harshly. I don't even know if it's pronounced lathe or lathe or what. After I was done with the chisel, it was time for the sandpaper. So I've used 120, then 200, 400, 800. I think I got up to about 2500. And then you could start to see finally the mosquito. And to do the final polishing, to really see through, toothpaste is actually what I use, and it actually worked really, really well. So with nothing but toothpaste, you get this perfect finish. And there it is, one cranefly slash mosquito in amber. Next part was to wood turn the top of the cane, and I wanted the mine to be removable, so which is why the first piece is going to be quite small. And almost dropped it there. The one on the left, I was still trying to get the shapes right, get the tweaks out, and then on the right is my first successful one. So I still found the height of the amber was a bit too high, so I shaved off about a centimeter off, and here I'm just makeshifting something to attach it back on the lathe and get it nice and shiny again. So that's the final result. So a little bit shorter, and I think it looks much closer to the original. And for the cane itself, I bought 2 table legs, hardwood. I think it was ash, if I'm not mistaken, and they were 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches. And for measurements, the cane without the amber piece was about 30 inches long. The top width is about 1.5 inch, and the bottom, before starting to taper to put the rubber cane tip, I think it's down to about 1 inch. And to put all the pieces together, I used some dowel screws. So I added those in. I put some epoxy on top of it after to really hold everything in place. So in the end, everything was quite sturdy. So I find everything here starting to look quite good. And the dowel screws weren't perfectly lined up, so you can slightly see where it's not completely perfect. But this is supposed to imitate a spine, and I guess in nature nothing's perfect, so that's what I tell myself at least to make me feel better. And the next part was to use some epoxy. So since I wanted the top of the cane to be removable, um, the chair leg already had the bolt coming out of one end, but I had to epoxy the nut part onto the other end of the stick. So just added some epoxy on both sides and glued that right in. And there goes the baby. So after adding half the epoxy, I added a little bit more, sanded it flush, and now we have my removable top piece. And next thing is to take my beautifully sanded wood here and add some vertical lines through them. So scratch up the whole thing. Bones normally have some vertical lines through them, so that should make the whole thing look a bit more authentic. So you can start to see here it looks more like real bone. And the next thing is to paint it. So I used the same acrylic paint as I used when I made the saber-tooth cat in the back here, and it worked quite well. And the only thing though is if I was to restart again, I would probably use a white stain instead of the acrylic paint. I find that the acrylic took away a lot of the wood grain away, so I had to add more lines even afterwards, so it probably would have been a little bit easier if if it kept the natural grain itself. So as you can see here, it's just, you can see some of the grain left, but yeah, stain would have shown it even more. So this here is the cane with only the one color added on the stick for now. And the next thing is to add some dark brown to add some more wear, depth and realism to the whole thing. So my first idea was just to add the dark brown between the vertebrae and then just wipe them with a cloth like that to try to fill up the grain or the lines through the whole thing. But it didn't really work, it just took the whole thing out. So I added the brown on the lines itself, and same thing, as soon as I passed it, it just took it out, so it didn't stay at all. So switching to a more rough paper towel, that actually did the trick, and it stopped filling in the lines. And here you can see that you can actually see the brown wood grain through the whole thing, so it worked quite well. And the next thing was just to permanently epoxy the amber piece on the top of the cane. And then just add in the rubber cane tip. No need for glue for that because it's already quite tight. And here I thought it looked pretty good, but I find it was just missing a little bit of brown, and there was a bit too much of a contrast between the dark brown and the light beige. So I diluted more brown with water to make it less contrasty, let's say, which filled it up better, but still too much. So I just diluted some white one and painted the white over it. And there I find the contrast is less intense, so I find this looks a lot better. So this is finally the final product. So really, all in all, I am quite happy with the way this whole thing turned out. I find it looks very similar to the original in the Jurassic Park movie. And I think my favorite thing on the whole thing is the stinger. Again, this is not a mosquito, this is a crane fly, and they do not have a stinger. So I actually glued just a random leg on its nose, and it makes it look like a real big mosquito. And the whole reason here why I wanted the top part to be removable is because I wanted to make it a little stand. So here's the little stand right here. So I wanted to be able to either hang the entire cane somewhere on the wall or just detach the amber piece and just put the little thing on a small shelf. And for now, since I don't know where to hang the cane, I just put it on the shelf here next to my other project, and I find it looks quite good right in there. And there it is. So the entire thing took over a year to complete, mostly because after the first two failed attempts, the mosquitoes were gone, so I had to wait for a whole year for them to come back. And of course I had to learn how to do the resin, learn how to use a wood turning table. So a lot of failed attempts doing that, but really all in all I'm super happy how this thing turned out, and had quite a bit of fun doing this cane. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please click like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next nerdish project that I make. Thank you.